the
That's
biggest
legit.
part. Yeah.
That's legit. No, I agree.
Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about the election coming up here. So,
Ooh, yeah.
like,
Let's do it.
what are your thoughts like going into it? Is it gonna do you think this election is gonna have a bigger impact than the one in 2016, or is it gonna be
I think it's
relatively
very
the same?
interesting. I'm very interested to see voter turnout because
Mhm.
I think that's something that's been heavily discussed by both parties and how to do that, how to vote, what the procedure is going to look like. Um, and it's something that I see being heavily advertised in social media. I don't know if it's just me, but in the OC area, I've been getting like 5 texts like a
I
day
know,
from
dude,
like
it's
random
crazy.
political parties asking me to text, like sending me photos and like, go vote, go vote. I'm like, I
Yeah,
already voted. Like,
I
I'm
know.
good.
Yeah.
But no, like I get it. It's going to be very interesting to see. And I'm coming from the perspective too of like, we live in Southern California, which is a very active sort of place, right? There,
Mhm.
and I know that politics aren't as heavily discussed in California or they are in some of the other 49 states across the country.
Mhm.
So I wish I can get that input. Like if I could, I would ask, one person from every state, like what do politics look like in your state? Like how do people feel about it? Like are they as active in it? Or are they not as active in it? Because I feel like it's something that we as Californians talk about a lot. It's super important. So yeah, I'm interested to see that. But another thing too is I'm a super impartial like devil's advocate too. So like you're never
Mhm.
ever going to get a straight answer from me about
Yeah.
anything as it
Uh-huh.
relates to politics. My favorite quote, and this is just something that I thought of that I think is really cool, is that whenever someone asks me for my opinion as it relates to really controversial things, my answer is going to be twice as long as anybody else's because I'm going to tell you both sides. I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
both sides, and then I won't, lean towards one or lean towards the other, but I'll tell you both
Mhm.
sides, and then
Yeah,
you can make it.
that's the I think that's something that most people lack is they only focus on one idea and they stick with it instead
Yeah.
of really, you know, kind of arguing against it and
Yeah.
trying to figure out the actual
Oh
truth.
man, I love
Because
devil's advocate. I love
yeah.
challenging ideas and all that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I think one key thing about this election is, and I'll actually speak from my perspective as someone that's really into public speaking, right? But I'll talk about that second. First thing is that in the last election, one thing I noticed is that I try and find similarities, right? What was one thing in the last election that would be similar to this election, right? And one thing that hasn't changed is that the current president faces a lot of scrutiny. Like that's always been the case,
Yeah.
right?
There's
And
always that there's
always, yeah, that's
yeah.
nothing new. That's nothing
Mhm.
new, right? But one thing that I noticed in the last election is that nobody thought he would win, right?
Yeah.
That's the same as this election. There's a
Mhm.
lot of people that aren't thinking that he's going to win. At least that's my perspective as someone from Southern California. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
But then he won. And the reason being is that because when people go in poll booths, they may vote differently than what they say or what they're outspoken.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of people that they don't speak a lot on their political beliefs or they hold up a front on a lot of different things. So my thinking is that, or I'm thinking, whatever you want to call it, is if that trend is going to continue to follow, I
Mhm.
think this election is going to be a lot less predictive as people think it's going to be.
Yeah. Cuz even
Because you don't know. Yeah, like
even
when
the
people step in that booth, yeah,
even the polls like right now they're leaning towards Biden, but like even the last election it was leaning towards
exactly,
Hillary, so like I don't even believe
exactly.
the polls anymore. Like
That's
wait
my
till it
thought.
happens. Like
No, yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm thinking. There's no way for me to predict at all, and I have no idea. People ask me like, who do you think's gonna win? And I honestly, genuinely, because I'm
Yeah.
thinking on like both sides, and I'm like, man, at this point, I don't even know what people are thinking.
I know.
I don't know. I honestly don't know
Yeah.
because it's just. You could flip with a switch. Like that's the way everything is now. Everything just happens so quickly. There's so much happening at the same time. I feel like one thing could change, and then all of a sudden, the waves, there's this huge tsunami that goes in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. And the second thing too is I was talking in this conversation with someone else. I forgot who it was, but it was really interesting. Where we were discussing like the public speaking of both candidates because I'm a nerd when it relates to public speaking.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
run the TED Club on campus,
I
right?
know.
And I had this really interesting thought, and I wanted to share it with you and with other people because I think
Mhm.
it's interesting. Where a lot and historically, right? A lot of the Democratic candidates they speak differently than the Republican candidates, right? Republican candidates typically are more bold, loud speakers. They speak very strongly about certain things. They're very patriotic and they spur a lot. They're the ones
Yeah.
that get the crowds going and all that sort of stuff, right? And historically, for the past 1, 2 presidents, I'm talking for the 5, 7 years, right?
Mhm.
Democratic candidates have been more articulate, more well-spoken. You look at President Barack Obama, you look at Joe Biden, they don't rally a crowd, right? They don't have that same attention like as a Republican candidate maybe to get the crowd, going and this and that, right?
Kind of a lower voice and slower tempo.
Lower, they're not shouting behind the podium. They never do that. And I was wondering, right? Because speaking has such a powerful impact on an idea or how you influence people, right? And I was wondering, like, what if there was because if people say, what if there was a Republican candidate that had more of a focus on policy, but what if there was a Democratic candidate that had the same public speaking ideas and skills as a Republican candidate, right? I think that's so strange. I think that's so strange to think about because, one of the things is that if people like loud, if public speaking and the ability to captivate a crowd is so important as it relates to politics, that image, a Democratic candidate that would be able to replicate that from a Republican candidate, I think would be very strong. And I just haven't seen it in the past couple of years. I don't think there's a speaker out there that can rally a crowd like some of the Republican candidates we've seen in the past.
I think that has to do with social media too, because people see like loud things and everything on social media is to grab your attention in a few seconds. And if you have somebody that could do that with their voice, with a speech, then you're more likely to watch it and gravitate towards the idea.
Exactly. This is the example that we were talking about when I was having this discussion originally, right? Is that what if there was a Democratic candidate that could talk about wearing masks the same way as a Republican can talk about not wearing masks? Like that would be so interesting to me. Like, because sometimes